Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Feinstein, and Larry Blank and I are here together to talk about one of our favorite orchestras, the Pasadena Pops. And we thank you very much for joining us and making it possible for us to do what we do, thanks to people that have discriminating taste in music. Right, Larry?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things I was hoping we could talk about is how you plan the Pops programs and how they're put together. That was a surprise question.
Well, they're all surprise questions because I wanted to keep it spontaneous, right? So good. We like that. Planning a concert, planning a program, to me is one of the most difficult aspects of this whole experience. Even though I've done that for years, I probably spend dozens and dozens of hours working on programs. Not only is it about looking for music and seeing what's available, getting the music, figuring out songs for a guest, coming up with the right theme. There are so many different boxes to check in the process of putting something together that it's very time consuming. And it's also very fulfilling when it comes together, when it works. It's something that I really enjoy, but sometimes I have such panic about it until it's done.
I was looking back in our records, and we met 30 years ago, close to it, in London working on a concert, and then after that you started asking me to conduct for you, and I was going through the programs, but I noticed on all the programs it wasn't just a question of slow, fast, it was a question of what material was interesting to the audience and what was interesting to you and what was interesting to the orchestra. And it was quite an education for me and going back on it. So now I think when you're conducting, rather than just working as a performer, you really plan it a little bit more for the audience and the orchestra so that it's interesting for the orchestra to play as well. And challenging.
That's a very good point, because a lot of music that is Pops music is sometimes music that is pandering in one way or another. And one of the things I've always strived for, as have you, is to present music, to have an orchestra play music that is substantial, whatever that means, that it gives them fulfillment performing it, and it excites them as musicians. And when I have arrangements created, and of course you've done some wonderful ones for me, I'm always mindful of creating charts that are interesting and fulfilling for the orchestra to play. And there are so many arrangements that are out there that are kind of boring. They may sound good, but they have long whole notes for the strings and just sort of are what we call boilerplate. So I think that's one of the reasons that we have had receptive audiences in Pasadena, because every single arrangement is very thoughtfully chosen.
What's so great, and I'm just thinking about this, since we are West Coast based and in the middle of the film community, the orchestra, unlike many other Pops orchestras around the country, do not look down on Pops music. They love it because it's their bread and butter and they do it all the time in the studios. So I know you really pride yourself in making sure the arrangements are up to the level of a Hollywood orchestra, and that's a very high bar, because they play so much music and they're so facile. So I really often am pleased when you pull out stuff that's shockingly difficult to play and they just nail it the first time.
Yes, it's very impressive, and I often think how lucky I am to get to stand there, hold the stick, when everybody else on that stage is fundamentally better educated and more talented than I am. But at least we create something together that resonates with people. The point that you made about these being studio musicians is a very significant one, because I consider anyone that can do studio work to be the finest kind of instrumentalist, because it is the hardest thing to do. Without question, it is the hardest thing to do. And to work under the pressure of having to get something right in a short period of time and assimilate it is something that is special. It takes a special kind of breed, I think. It takes a special kind of personality and a certain kind of ability that someone who may be a marvelous player may not have to be able to do that kind of work.
Absolutely. It's not only do they have to graduate whatever musical academy they went to, mastering the classics that they're expected to play, but going way beyond that to covering a whole different strata of music. Not to make light of any of it, but very often the orchestra doesn't differentiate between playing Jerry Bach or Johann Sebastian Bach. It's the same to them. It's music, and it's good music, and they play it as such. And I really admire you for handling it that way, and also the orchestra being able to play up to those standards.
Well, thank you. I guess I'm a lowbrow. I mean, I love classical music, and I know a lot of it. I mean, I've lived with a lot of it and grown up with a lot of it. But my tastes have gravitated towards arrangements of popular songs. And when you have arrangers like Maurice Dupac or Herbert Spencer or Leo Arnaud, who knew Ravel and worked with Ravel, when you play those arrangements, it elevates them to another level. And Maurice Dupac, for example, was a guy who worked on Broadway, working for all the great songwriters. But I found in a collection I obtained several orchestrations he had done of Beethoven piano sonatas that he orchestrated, sections of them for full symphony orchestra. And I think that these arrangers would do things like that for their own amusement and to keep their skills sharp.
Well, it's interesting because, as you know, there were so many classical composers actually spent a lot of time in Hollywood. Stravinsky was here for a while. Copland, of course, did some movie scores. And there are others that I'm not thinking of right now. But one of my favorite stories is Dmitri Tiomkin.
Tiomkin, oh yes, of course, yes.
Tiomkin got up when he won an Academy Award and said, "I'd like to thank Mozart, Ravel, Shostakovich," and so on and so on. Got a very big laugh from the audience, but it was everybody he stole from. I want to talk about some. I know, of course, you're a great exponent of Gershwin because of your relationship with Ira, but and Harry Warren, who you were very good friends with, and I know your relationships with Julie Stein and Jerry Herman. Are there any other composers that you think we should hear more of?
Well, Johnny Green. You know, Johnny Green was a dear friend, and I'd hoped to record an album with him playing the piano because he was a marvelous pianist. But he had a stroke and never quite recovered after that, and it didn't happen. But as a composer, Johnny wrote popular songs, including I Cover the Waterfront, Body and Soul, and then he wrote film scores, his most famous being Raintree County, which both you and I have conducted the overture from, which was something that I was able to reconstruct from his collection, which now resides at Harvard, and I was amazingly able to wrest it from there, which was no small feat. But Johnny is a guy who did major, wonderful orchestrations of the works of many songwriters for his own concerts and for the Hollywood Bowl, where he conducted for 32 seasons. And his work deserves to be remembered. There are so many of them, though. There's so many. I mean, when you start going down that list, and then it gets into the songwriters who also wrote concert pieces, be they larger scale works like Meredith Willson, who wrote 2 symphonies, and people only know him for The Music Man or The Unsinkable Molly Brown, but he wrote a big chunk of classical music, as did Johnny Green, who wrote 2 symphonies. Dana Suisse, who wrote You Ought to Be in Pictures, also wrote 2 piano concerti and several other compositions and small-scale orchestral things. Ferdy Groffet, in addition to the Grand Canyon Suite and the Mississippi Suite, wrote a mass of all kinds of concert music. And Vernon Duke, Vernon Duke, who wrote April in Paris and Autumn in New York, was first and foremost a classical composer under his real name, Vladimir Dukelski, and he wrote a great deal of concert music, and then also wrote something called April in Paris Fantasy, which is a classical, his own classical setting for clarinet and orchestra of his popular song. And that's a piece that I discovered on a rare radio air check from 1934. And I could not find documentation of this piece anywhere on the planet, not on the internet. I looked in every single archive, his estate, his papers. The piece, if I hadn't found this air check, these old records, nobody would know that the thing exists. And his estate, thanks to Scott Dunn, has reconstructed and restored the whole thing. And it's something that I hope to play in Pasadena.
I think one of the great things that the orchestra provides for you and me both, and us for them, is your great passion for discovering pieces like that and recreating them and using your own resources to recreate some of this music, because we have the orchestra at our disposal to play it. And what's so terrific is Laura Unger, who is always supportive of that and allowing us, I say that generously because it's you, to play all this stuff and the outlet. And I know that the orchestra looks forward to this every summer. They just go, wow, why didn't we know about this piece? And they get to play something, and they're playing it for the first time because it's perhaps the second time it's ever been played. And I think it's such a terrific thing. And I love being able to sit on the stage with you and experience some of this stuff that should have been heard over and over again.
Yes, it's wonderful. It's the ultimate karaoke. You can use something and play it with a world-class orchestra. The excitement, though, you say it's heard for the second time. Sometimes things are heard for the first time. Sometimes they're genuine premieres. And oftentimes we play things that were recorded once in the recording studio and then put away and were never heard publicly, like some of the arrangements we played from The Sound of Music that were recorded by Alfred Newman, arranged by Herbert Spencer and Skip Martin and such. So there's so much out there. And it's my great passion. But the thing that's wonderful about it is that the audiences have embraced this music. They have embraced the concept. And it is going against the grain, if you will, of what all the other pops orchestras are doing. They're playing a lot of more contemporary material. And of course, that's fine. Yet how many more opportunities will there be for people to hear this music? And the fact that people understand that and have passion about it. And I guess we've educated people along the way that they've come to understand that what we do is something that is unique in that fashion.
What's also very exciting for me is having an orchestra of this caliber. If I get to write an arrangement or play an arrangement that I've written somewhere else and the orchestra nails it the first time, and you've heard me say the orchestra, thank you for making me look so good. Because they play so well that they make it seem so effortless.
Well, they do, and they also, when something plays well, I mean, you and I both know, you better than I, being a world-class orchestrator, how sometimes things are brilliantly orchestrated, but they don't always play well first time. They don't play down, as you say. It's you have the ability to write an arrangement that can be very complex, but it makes sense, whatever that means for the players. They can play it down. They just play it through, and there's very few traffic jams or train wrecks along the way. Absolutely,
and the quality of this orchestra is something that the community should appreciate and realize what they have. I think they do. The proof is in the pudding, and every summer when we look out and see 5,000 people showing up for concerts, and I know it's not just to see the peacocks at the Arboretum. But to hear the orchestra, and it's become such a regular thing, and I think that's due to your presence and to what you're bringing to the orchestra.
Well, thank you. It's certainly a beautiful collaborative effort. And I feel sheepish sometimes because David Lockington, who conducts this Pasadena Symphony, is such a brilliant talent and a great person to boot. And I think, gee, they put up with me after working with him. You know, it's it's very humbling.
And of course, we have a great concert master in the two Amy's, and very helpful to all of the concerts. So what are our plans? What happens next for us?
Well, what happens next? This summer season has been moved lock, stock, and barrel to next year. So everything that we had planned for this summer will happen next summer. And those programs are going to be ones that will benefit actually from the extra time that we have, and that I'll have more time to research and look for more music and make decisions. Mm-hmm. One of the programs that I'm very excited about is the Latin program, because there is so much Latin music, symphonic Latin music that is possible to program. And to figure it out has been one of the great challenges for me, because there is so much in so many different genres. I mean, there's the classical Latin pieces, and then there's, like Chabrier, España, those sorts of things that are just marvelous little orchestral miniatures. Like play a few of those. And then there's George Gershwin's Cuban Overture, and I found an arrangement of that for piano and orchestra that was done in 1938 for the Paul Whiteman Band that Ira Gershwin actually said he preferred to his brother's original. And that's something that I've wanted to reconstruct. And then all of the different popular arrangements of of the Latin songbook. It's just, it's staggering. It's staggering what is there. So that's going to be a program for which I'm most excited because of the possibilities, and I have a feeling it's going to be sort of like the first of many Latin themed programs that we'll do.
And of course, a great deal of our contemporary music comes from Latin rhythm and stuff. Over the years has absorbed itself in, especially from the 60s when Bacharach was, importing all that stuff from Mancini and everybody else. And it's just part of our culture now. It's part of the music that we expect to hear. And we know so much of the material just from evolution.
Yes. I was thinking the other day about Los Angeles, how probably most of the street names and most of the names of the cities here are Spanish, and how the culture, the Spanish and Latin culture, is such an important part of this part of the world, and how that connection and melding of these cultures has created such incredible music here. In the 1940s, during the Good Neighbor policy, when the government, as propaganda, was trying to import Latin culture here, we had this wave of Hollywood film musicals, many of them made by MGM, that featured Xavier Cugat and his orchestra, with these grand presentations of Latin music. And that tradition is something that I would love to help continue. I just have been looking into another collection of Andre Castellanet's, his music, because he did a lot of Latin music. So there's a lot out there.
And we'll be playing it.
Yeah. And there's a gentleman on the East Coast who has the Xavier Cugat library, and he found some symphonic arrangements in the Cugat collection. So I'm hoping to find out what those are, gain access, and if they're worthy, perhaps we'll play them. So,
that's great.
So those are the kinds of things that excite me.
And the rest of our season, I know Motown, is that correct?
Yes, the Road to Motown. Road to Motown. Because it's the influences that help to create Motown. And the sound of Motown is something that is a very instantly recognizable sound, a unique sound. And to translate that for a symphony is something that takes a little bit of thought, because it's very easy to write simplistic arrangements of some of those tunes. I mean, as far as the orchestra goes. But to be able to create a show that is a organic salute to that era, to Motown, and then to have a substantial chunk of music that is worthy of the orchestra to play is another exciting challenge.
I think you and I, and also a great deal of the audience, grew up with a lot of that music, and it's very familiar, more familiar than we acknowledge.
Yeah.
And also, there are plans for another Broadway evening.
It is, as I recall, it's 100 years of Broadway. And that is, again, challenging to put together because there are so many possibilities. There's so much music. So it's always a combination of programming familiar things in new arrangements or different symphonic arrangements that will show off the orchestra, and then to present those little gems that you and I know and love that we want people to hear so they can appreciate. For example, you know, the overture from Fiorello, or Tenderloin, you know, those pieces are ones that are not necessarily well known, but they're orchestral showpieces. Like when we played the Mac and Mabel overture, which was the first time you had expanded it for symphony orchestra. And it's something that certainly will be played by other orchestras.
I think it's great because now this is a good example. Usually everyone has heard the overture to South Pacific, King and I, Gypsy, and Funny Girl for the last 30 years over and over again. And it's nice to open up some fresh material that the audience actually knows. They just haven't heard it in a long time. So I'm really looking forward to that as well.
Yes.
Well, I think we've done it again.
That's what I was afraid of. Well, I just want to reiterate the joy of collaboration. And I want to encourage people to let me know and let all of us know what you want to hear or how you feel about what we're doing, because people have great ideas about songs and pieces that they'd like to hear programmed. And that's important because I've discovered a lot of things thanks to the imagination and ideas of others.
Well, I'm looking forward to welcoming the orchestra back as well as the audience. But in the meantime, we have these virtual reality shows, which are really terrific, and we'll get to play some archival stuff. So I hope everyone will tune into the Facebook page and the web page and hear all the music that you and I both like to do, and apparently that the audience likes to hear.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Larry. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we hope to see you in the flesh very soon.
There is work to be done, to be done. There is more to be won, to be won. Come, you son of a son of a gun, take your stand.
Let the drums roll out. Hear the trumpet call. While the people shout, strike up the band. Hear the cymbals ring, calling one and all. Now's the time to swing. strike up the band. There is work to be done, to be done. There is more to be won, to be won. Come, you son of a gun, take your stand. Fall in line, ye foe. Come along, let's go. Hey, leader, strike up the band. Hear the cymbals ring, calling one and all. Strike up the band. Come along and join the fun. Now the party has begun. I'm sure that Kate Thompson will agree. We got the rhythm and rhyme harmony. Hallelujah, we got music that's live. Hallelujah, are you hip to the jive? We got a big piano that is grand, and the best orchestra in the land, everybody. Go.